Hello.
And we're live.
Oh, sorry, Gary. I was a bit excited there.
We're out of practice.
Yeah. Hello and welcome to another live demonstration. And like Gary says, we're out of practice because we've not done many for a long time. So welcome back. It's coming up to that festive season, so it's a great chance to be creative. And you don't have to be really detailed and creative and really go over the top, because I know if I receive anything handmade, it doesn't matter how simple it is, it's made from the heart. So I'm going to show you how to make some cards, and they don't have to be overly detailed. If you've got the time, perfect, but you don't, because if you're doing more than one, you want something that's simple. So first of all, I'll start off. This was a card I did last year, and it was the berries that inspired me. On a simple watercolour card, nice to be able to throw down the watercolour and paint a picture. One tip I can say for when you're doing cards is use trace it down. So I have sketched out these berries, gone round in ink, and then used tracing paper, trace down anything so you can replicate your image lots of times. And you can do that. Here's a blank one I was preparing for something else. But that is a great way to be able to make duplicate cards. Each one is going to look individual because you never paint the same, but it's just a great way to get an image down. I'm not going to do that in this one. I'm going to do it freehand, but that's because I've practiced this image quite a lot. So, as much as I like this, I wanted to try something different. This paper caught my eye, and it's handmade paper. But what's beautiful about it is it's made with these petals, these flower petals in it. This is the Azara flower. It's very absorbent paper, but beautiful. So, like with any paper, you have to practice and find out what it can do, because it's very different to maybe other papers you've been using. So I have a little sheet of paper here, and I know it's not a true comparison, but I'm going to compare it to a paper I'm familiar with. So this is SAA practice paper. I think it's a watercolour paper. And I just want you to see how different mediums are on the papers. And it's really important to always practice. When you have a new paper, a new surface, or something you want to try, you need to practice. You need to see what happens, because it can be a surprise when you're in the middle of something quite detailed. You put something on and it bleeds out, and it's so unexpected. It's quite disappointing. So, first thing I'm going to try is these pens. Doesn't matter what colour, I'm just trying the pen. Orange and green. So these are the Ecolime. These are really beautiful, bright pens. So on a watercolour paper, I find they can be controlled really nicely. On this paper, which is more like a blotting paper, to be honest, it's not got size on, which allows for the paint to sit on the surface a little bit. So let's see what happens. It's quite dark. There is a little bleeding. So nice colours. It works okay. I can see that it spreads a little bit more, but you account for that. Actually, quite pleasantly surprised how well that works, because on some papers, it could really bleed out. There's some bleeding, especially when it's wet, so you can see the difference here on the dry surface, and as the first layer was still a bit damp, it bleeds. You can either make that work for you, or you avoid it. So let's try some other pens. So these are the Elegant Writers. I use these a lot. They're not going on overly. I think it might be a little bit dry. Let's try a different colour. So the black. Again, they go on, they work. Not quite as bright as on the watercolour paper, but I'm sure I could work with those. So that's a good thing. Pencils. So this is, I think it's a polychromos. It does take the pencil. What I can see is the delicate surface is getting a little bit rubbed away, so I can't see there's going to take many layers. If I go in over the petals, unfortunately, because of the hard pencil, it is taking them away. And you can see the difference on the watercolour paper. It doesn't take the pencil as easily. Or this type of pencil. Let's try pastel pencil, because this is a much softer core. It just seems to be scratching up the surface. So I'm sure I could use it. I will have to be delicate and just be aware that it's going to take off the flowers compared to the watercolour paper. So this is also showing how important it is to get the right surface for your mediums. Right, let's try some wet mediums. I've got a bit of gouache, and I'm not going to put it on the palette. I don't think. I can probably just take a little bit from the lid, because I'm only just testing. So gouache goes on pretty much any surface. It's a nice opaque paint. So let's see how it works on here. A little bit of bleeding, only a little bit, but it does stay bright. See if it goes over the flowers. This was what I was having problems with the pencils. It does. I can see that the flowers, though they're made as the paper's made into a mulch and then they're dropped in, some of them are still sitting on the surface, so do rub off. I'm going to deal with that at the end, but no, gouache would work fine. I do know, as that's wet and I put another layer in, it would bleed. Acrylic, I'm sure this is going to work fine, because acrylic again goes on pretty much any surface. And it may seal the flowers, but it may also cover them. So it's just something to consider. Yeah, that goes on fine. Probably put it on quite thickly. You've got to be aware this is a thin paper. It is quite delicate, so too thick it may lead to the acrylic cracking. But this is straight from the tube. Again, that would work nicely. Let's just pick up a bit of watercolour. So watercolour. Now that just seemed to sink in and get dull quite quickly. For me, I like crisp colours. So let's try and see, using another colour on top of the damp surface. Let's see how that works. It works okay. Because I'm used to watercolour paper, you know, I'm having to readapt and, you know, just think, how will that work for me? So watercolour, I wanted to kind of replicate that watercolour feel, but it didn't seem to work with watercolour. For me, it sank back too much. It dulled. It didn't give me the crisp colours I was looking for. So after testing lots of different mediums, I ended up deciding that I like the Inktense paints. So these work very similarly to a watercolour in that you put them on in the same way. I found that they seem to stay much stronger. Maybe it's the colours in my palette. Let's compare the red, because that's a very similar colour. It just stayed that little bit brighter. I don't know if you can see there. So I have a palette here, and that is what I decided to use. But, you know, it's also doing these testings opened up ideas. I can think, oh, maybe I could use this in a part of a painting. But it is important to test and try papers, because very familiar, kind of know how things are going to work. Sometimes a bit of a surprise, like the taking off of the flowers was a bit disappointing, but I need to work around that. So that's what I'm going to do. Size of the card, I've got a deckled edge card. These are available with different surfaces. You get watercolour ones like this. Not sure which one this is, to be honest. I think it might be. It's got some texture, but that's not the important bit. It's this paper is what I'm going to be using. This is just a background card. You can use any bit of card, to be honest. And I'm going to get a shape out. And now, very similar to Chinese rice paper, I can cut out a shape, I suppose, using water. So, and it just rips. This shows you how delicate this paper is. And I don't like that green there, but I like those flowers, so that's what I was trying to incorporate. Let's see if there's anywhere else. So this is just water, and look how easy this gives me a torn edge. I think I'm going to have to take this in a little bit more, only because I want that green to disappear. So if you've ever used Chinese rice paper, this is very similar. It's just a non-absorbent paper. Need a bit more for you. And let's run this along there. I'm not looking for a really precise finish. I want it to be a bit rough and raggedy. Really enhances that handmade feel of the paper. A bit more. No, that's fine. I can work with that. So that real handmade feel really enhanced by this deckled edge. Okay. So this paper underneath is just because the colour will bleed through. Like I said previously, you can use this to trace down. What I did find is putting the graphite on the surface can scratch away these flowers. So on this surface, I am going to do it freehand. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect. I think sometimes things that aren't quite as beautifully perfect, you know, have their own characteristic. It's handmade, and I think hopefully people will appreciate that. So I have an image here, and I'm only going to take that kind of area, and I'm going to not copy exactly. There may not be quite the same amount of berries. What I'm going to look at is, this is quite a nice shape. That's fairly easy to replicate. And there are some nice leaves, which I can add on. So I'm going to do that. I'm just going to decide where. Now, because these flowers are quite delicate, I'm actually going to try and use the areas without the flowers on. So, using a very fine pen, because I did use a thicker pen, and it just gave too thicker outline, which you can see here. That was using the thicker pen. It gave that much thicker outline. It wasn't what I was looking for. I was looking for something much more delicate, which I had practiced here. You can see here. And this is a much nicer, you get much lighter outline. So I'm just going to do one berry. Now this, at first I thought it was rowan. It isn't, it's sea buckthorn, because I remember where I took the image. It was at Gibraltar Point near Skegness. So knowing that it's sea buckthorn, it does make sense. So some of these orange berries behind. There's one here, maybe one here. And then again, not overly perfect. Practice doing little circles. Doesn't mean you have to stop practicing and observing. So I'm taking some of the shapes that I'm looking at. So first ones I'm putting on are the ones that are whole berries, i.e. not behind. And if I put them on first, I can then easily fill in the others. And again, some may not be perfect. There's one behind there. That's not perfect, but doesn't matter. One just sneaking out there. There was another one here. I'm going to make this bunch a little bit longer. So you're still also thinking about composition, even on a simple shape like this, where you're just adding circles. I'm still thinking about composition, you know, how balanced is it looking? So that's nice. They're not all, they're slightly in a row, but I can't do much about those. But by adding one maybe slightly higher, it's kind of broken that up. And to be fair, the berries do hang quite evenly. Okay, let's do a full one here, so it's a bit lower. Quite like a nice bit of a triangle shape, I think. So if I have my, let's put some up here. Let's put another one here. And maybe there. Okay, so I'm just going to put on the stems, which all seem to go into a much thicker stem. So let's think about this. I like that shape there. So let's do that. And let's put another shape here carefully over that leaf. Now I will show you at a later dates or at the end just what I'm going to do about these flowers and make it a little bit more durable. That was the word I was thinking of. So these all have stems, and then they also have these lovely little I don't know what they are. What do you think these are, Gary? These little bits at the end. They must have a technical term.
Some sort of, is it
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
probably a little
A nugget, nuggin. But I'm sure there's a technical term. So here, even now, I'm looking at the balance, thinking, maybe I need one a little higher. Again, see, that looks quite nicely draped. And these all kind of go on to this hanging.
Google seems to think it might be a persistent calyx from what it was.
Well, there you go, a persistent calyx.
Yeah.
It's a noggin. It works. All the little bit at the bottom. Well done, Gary. Good old search engine, yes. Okay, let's put some of these, what was it again?
Persistent calyx.
Persistent calyxes on. You learn something every day. And again, I'm varying where they are. To be fair, I think they're going to be at the bottom. So you've got the stem, you've got the berry, and I think they'll be underneath here. If you were being really precise, you would make sure that they were underneath. But this is a painting. I want it to look like a cluster, and I think I might, if I'm careful, be able to put a couple more just to take this over. Because I don't think that's completely balanced yet. Actually, I think I'm going to have to do another stem. You can see how delicate this paper is, because it's catching even with the pen. But I do like this very fine pen. Just having to be careful. That's not going to take it. Okay. I know it's slightly off centre, but that's what I like. So now for the fun bit. And I am going to use, which I don't normally, because I like to use a normal paintbrush, but I did find this worked. So in the Inktense set, you get a water brush, a mini water brush, which you can put water in the barrel, and you can keep it in the palette really easily by just filling the barrel and putting the lid on. So that's really handy. But I've actually found that this little brush, which, like I say, I don't always use, I often use a normal brush, works really nicely for this. So I'm just going to activate, clean, because I'm rubbish at cleaning my brush, because I'm not dipping it in water. There is that little sponge, you can see that's a bit dirty, and that helps to clean. And I'm going to use the paint quite thickly, not water it down too much, because this is more susceptible to very wet paint. And I'm not putting it on overly evenly, because this is a card that I'm hoping to do more than one. And to be honest, I'm looking for a painterly finish. I think putting the pen on first has given me that great start. So there we go, not filling out right up to the line. The paint is a little thicker than I would normally use, just to stop that excess bleeding that I might expect. That's quite nice. And I'm glad I chose this, because I think it is keeping that lovely brightness. And the berries work well with the flower petals already embedded in the paper.
So Anita,
Yes.
what make of paper is this? Oh dear. You know.
No, I think it's the Kaldi. It's made in the Himalayas, but we don't call it Kaldi.
Right.
We do sell it. We sell two types, one without the embedded flowers, and this is the Azara flower petal, which I really like because I love the petals in it. But I think it's made in the mountains of the Kathmandu, if I'm right.
Okay.
But we don't call it Kaldi in our description. So that was why I hesitated. But yes, it's a handmade paper from the mountains of Kathmandu. Very absorbent, not actually, you have to really think of how you're working with it. It's not a paper you can just jump into and paint on with watercolour, which, to be honest, I hoped I would be able to, but found to my cost you can't. But like with anything, you can find a way and actually make it work. So I'm just putting on some more berries without the pen round at the moment because I want to balance and alter. I can put the pen on afterwards. That's okay. Okay, I'm not going to stick with just one colour. I could, because I think that works fine, but I want to just add a bit more. Now that's a bit too red, so like with paint, a watercolour I can mix and get a darker orange rather than the red. Just give my berries a little bit more form. Just dabbing, I'm not making it complicated. If I want to do 20 of these, I don't want to be making it overcomplicated, and to be honest, I don't have the time. As much as I enjoy doing it, if I'm going to do 20 and get them out in time for Christmas, I really need to find a way to work quickly. And I think that has helped. So a bit of red and a bit of this orange, just to make a darker orange, not too red. Just catch the berries either behind or underneath. And you notice I'm not having to squeeze any paint out because it gives a constant flow of water. It's not overly wet, which is again why I have chosen to use it this time. Normally, I like to control the water on the brush, either make it a bit wetter or a bit drier. But with this, because it's fairly constant, again, it helps with the speed because I'm not having to change or add more water. It's just going to be the consistency I want straight away. And that's, another reason sometimes why I would use a water brush. Right, these ones I added. Okay. So, let's see. I do have some here on the petal. Just being quite careful. Don't know if I'll be able to go in with the pen, but I'll try. Okay. Some more up there. And I think that's, again, just adding that little bit of red, just taking that to another dimension. I've been quite good at leaving some gaps around, and I think that's working as well. Let me put some greenery on. Again, this green is quite light, so I'm going to just put it on as a quick light. And it's catching the texture of the paper. So again, it's leaving gaps as I drag it up. Bright ink tints means I don't have to worry about it dropping back. And unlike watercolour, it will be permanent once it's dry. Let's see if I can. Careful over that flower. Right, I'm going to make sure I've given most of these berries something to hang from. Doesn't matter if I miss one or two, but it doesn't make sense if they're just floating in midair. Twist my brush on. So a lot of these will need. Let's add some more. I don't think there's a lot of floating going on there. So, pen, don't know whether it will work because it's still a bit damp. You can see there it's bleeding. So I should have been a bit more patient and let it dry. But not a problem. Careful over the flower. Okay, that's fine. I'm happy with that. Try a little bit more darker green. Just try to another level rather than just a flat green. Might work over the petal, which it has done. Great. I'm going to twist this brush in order to get a point. It's better. Okay. It's better. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to just give it a dry, because I want to try and add some white pen on top, just to bring out some roundness of the berries and a bit of shine. So just bear with me a minute. Hopefully that's dry enough. Blasted everything off the table. So there's pen. Now this I found was quite scratchy and obviously a little contaminated. I think the best way I found was to actually dot them on. Might still be a bit. That's better. Where it's drier, it is catching. I think even because it was scraping away when I was drawing on it, I use this technique, but actually I find this as another dimension of the texture. Leaves, I haven't done any leaves. They can come on. Another dimension and texture. Can be snow, it can be shine. Just catching the top of some of the berries. They're still a bit damp. What I would normally also do is have about 5 going at the same time. So do one, do another, do another, do another. Especially when I'm doing lots of the same. So let's have a look at some leaves. That's a nice fun leaf. It kicks up that way and has a nice oval shape. Now the reason I thought these were rowan berries, but the leaves gave it away. So these are long, thin leaves with the light, a light green underneath, and that's where I realised that they were sea blackthorn, and they're actually edible. People make them into jams and jellies. So they're really quite nice little. Let's see if I can take that over. Little leaves. That's it, don't need many. Then go back in with the green. Can always add a few more if I either have the time or feel that it needs something. The paint doesn't flow across the surface like it does on a watercolour paper, but it's a different paper. You have to keep reminding yourself it is different. It's not the same. So add in some dark green, just to give a bit of different value. And this little one here, I like this green. It is bright, and on this paper, it kind of drops back to a much more natural green than it does on the watercolour paper. Just, because the paper's wet, that's dropping in that lovely darker green and doing the job for you. I like it when that happens. Just blends and bleeds and creates a really nice shape. There you go, just drop it in. See if I can go over this leaf here, just, oh, yes. Okay. I don't want to touch that very much more because the chances are quite high that I would probably start to take the surface off. So what this paper's also doing is making sure I'm being quick, I'm not being over fussy. I just leave it now. So I'm just going to give it a quick dry, holding on to everything. Okay, so that is still quite a delicate painting. And I'm going to put it on to the card using glue. Now you can use any glue, PVA. It was a glue varnish for this, and actually I don't like how it's finished. It's gone a bit yellow and a bit brittle. So again, after all that, I didn't find the right glue, but a PVA does work. And I'm using this glue, which is I use it quite often. It's Deco Patch. I can't tip it now. I've taken the lid off. Can you see that?
If you put, yeah, that would set the main camera.
Okay. And it's a glue varnish, so it's actually suited for gluing, but also I'm going to use it as a varnish, and it's whiter than the one I used before, so that's not going to make the surface as yellow. Just gluing. Should have got a bigger brush, but because it's glue, I didn't want to use a good brush, and I could only find good bigger brushes. So I'm using one of my masking fluid brushes. And I am putting it all over the back of the surface, just because of the paper being that much more delicate. I'm going to give it every chance. I might not have the edges completely flat. Still keeping that handmade feel. I like those glues that are different colours, so you can actually see when they've gone on. I think kids use them, but I can't see where I've been. As it's a card and it's been given to someone else, I want it to have some life rather than it disintegrating within a couple of minutes. Okay, so let's glue this on. Move it. Oops. Okay, done. Done. Look at that. That looks fun. So, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to protect these leaves. Delicate. And use this glue varnish. The reason why I've used this is because it is a glue varnish. And I know it does dry glossy. You can get a matte version. I like the glossiness. But it's going to protect and save these leaves. The reason I haven't put this on before was because if I do, it would have made it a little bit more difficult to paint over with the ink tints, or if I was using a watercolour, because it wouldn't be able to adhere to the surface. But because I've put it on at the end, I'm just using it as protection. And unfortunately some petals may fall off. But it works. You can. There are glues that you can use and paint over with watercolour, like the collage glue. It's designed to, I think that's Schminker. It's designed to allow you to paint over with watercolour, and that was something I could have done. I could have prepared the surface, but the point of the paper was I'm using this paper and all its characteristics. So I didn't want to lose that by putting something on the surface. So I'm working with it rather than against it. Glue it on. Right, I'm not very... So this should now hopefully protect those petals. Make sure that they don't fall off. Got to be careful not to touch them too much because they are still delicate. But what you could use is a paper in an area and not actually touch it. Use it as, rather than like I've done and painted over it. Let's see if I can give that a blast. I think I've got everywhere. Maybe not there. I'm going to clean that brush because I know what I'll do is I'll leave it and not clean it, and then I've lost another brush. So clean the glue off straight away. Let's give this a blast. Lid on because I'll knock it over. Everything else out the way because it will blow off the table. Oh, it's preparation for using a hairdryer. Now, you'll notice the card has buckled a little bit. That's because of the glue. Hopefully, by drying it, it will flatten. That's not fully dry, but that's dried much better than the previous glue I used. Much better. See, that was quite yellow. That's dried and has still retained quite a lot of the characteristics of the paper, so that's the original. It's just yellowed it a little bit, but like I say, it's not fully dried, but it's kept it, and it means it's much more protected. These aren't going to fall off. So still a little bowed, but I'm sure that will drop off once it's dry. If not, to be honest, just open it out, bit of a towel, bit of an iron will often make them straight. Is that okay?
Just lay it
Flat?
Yeah,
Okay, flat. And then often these deckled cards come with an envelope. Go. So, making handmade cards on handmade paper. So, test the paper, try it, but by testing and trying it also gives you lots of inspiration for how it can be used. And I hope you enjoyed that, and join me again soon for another demonstration.